Hello everyone! Today the Bookworms are going to be reading Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, retold by Walter McVitty, illustrated by Margaret Early. Let's get into the book! Long ago, in the land of Persia, there lived two brothers, Qasim and Ali Baba. Qasim married a rich but unpleasant woman and became a wealthy merchant, while Ali Baba married a poor but kindly woman and lived a humble life by cutting wood and selling it in the marketplace. One day, while working in the forest, he saw a band of evil-looking men riding towards him. Fearing they might be robbers and cutthroats, he hid himself among the branches of a tree which was growing beside a very large rock. 40 men, all armed with long swords, brought their horses to a halt right underneath this tree. Their leader sprang from his horse and called to the rock, "Open, sesame!" At once, the rock opened, revealing a cave, into which the robbers bundled their bulging saddlebags. The rock then closed behind them, and all was silent. Ali Baba looked on in amazement. He dared not leave this tree in case the bandits suddenly came out and caught him spying on them, for he knew that would surely mean death. After some time, the rock opened once more, and the 40 thieves came out, their saddlebags now empty. As they mounted their horses, their leader raised his hand and called out, "Close, sesame!" The rock closed up once again, and the robbers rode off. Fascinated by what he had seen, Ali Baba climbed down from his tree and stood before the rock. He was curious to see if the magic words would work for him too. "Open, sesame!" he cried, and behold, the great rock opened at his command. Trembling with excitement, he entered the cave. The door closed behind him. Instead of being dark and gloomy as he expected, the cave was well lit, for there was a hole in its roof. Ali Baba was astonished by what he saw. Piled before him was a great treasure, expensive silks, costly rugs, and heaps of gold and silver. Although poor, Ali Baba was not a greedy man. He quickly filled a few sacks with gold coins, just enough for his 2 donkeys to carry. "Open, sesame!" he commanded again, and hurried out. Remembering to say, "Close, sesame!" he then led his donkeys home. When Ali Baba's wife saw the gold, she was speechless. He told her what he had seen and done and said to her, "You must promise to tell no one about this. We will bury the treasure and use it but a little at a time. Then no one will be suspicious. But first, we must measure it. While I dig the hole, run to my brother Qasim's house and borrow his weighing pan. But remember, say nothing more." Qasim's wife was very curious to know what Ali Baba could possibly have that was worth measuring, so she placed some soot on the bottom of the pan. When it was returned to her, she was astonished to find a piece of gold stuck to the soot. She became jealous and angry. She said to her husband, "Your brother Ali Baba is so wealthy, he does not just count his gold, he has to measure it, like grain. He pretends to be poor, but he must be richer than all of us." When he saw the scales and the gold coin, Qasim too grew jealous and angry. He ran to his brother's house and was just in time to see him putting the last of the gold into the hole. And so, Ali Baba had to tell his brother the whole story. Trembling with excitement, the greedy Qasim cried, "In the morning, I will go to the cave myself with 10 donkeys. I will be richer than you." "Be careful, brother," warned Ali Baba. "If the 40 thieves catch you, they will surely kill you." Qasim soon found the rock and, saying the magic words, opened up the cave and fell upon its treasure. He piled the gold into sack after sack. But when the time came for him to leave, he could not remember the magic words. "Open, barley!" he cried in panic. But of course, nothing happened. He tried again and again. "Open, rye! Open, caraway!" But it was no use. He was now a prisoner. Later that day, the 40 thieves returned. When they saw the 10 donkeys tied up outside the cave, they knew that someone had discovered their secret. With swords drawn, they rushed inside and killed Qasim without mercy and cut him into 6 parts. "We will leave his body inside the cave," said the robber chief, "as a warning to anyone else who might be foolish enough to try to steal our treasure." As the day wore on, Qasim's wife waiting at home grew more and more worried. When her husband did not return that night, she ran weeping to Ali Baba to ask for his help. In the morning, he went to the cave, where he found the remains of Qasim's body, which he brought back in a sack. When he arrived at his own house, he called for a servant, Morgiana, an orphan who had been raised as a daughter by Ali Baba and his wife. She had grown into a brave and wise woman. She knew how to solve problems of all kinds. Ali Baba told her of the terrible fate which had overtaken his brother and said to her, "While I go to break the sad news to his widow, you must think of some way in which we can bury these 6 pieces so that people will think that Qasim died a natural death. Otherwise, everyone will learn our secret, and then the robbers will come and murder us all." "I will try," she promised. The next day, Morgiana went to the workplace of an old cobbler and said, "Look, Mustafa, here is a gold coin. For this I want you to bring your needle and thread and come with me. But first I must bandage your eyes, for you must not know where you are going." This she did, and led him through the streets and down into the cellar of Ali Baba's house, where she removed the blindfold, giving him another gold coin. She said, "I wish you to sew the pieces of this body together. If you work quickly and well, you shall have another gold coin." When he had finished, Morgiana led Mustafa back to his shop and paid him as arranged. "Remember, you must tell nobody what you have done or where you have been," she warned him. Qasim was then buried properly, all in one piece, and nobody suspected how he had really met his death. When the 40 thieves returned to their cave and discovered that Qasim's body had been taken away, they knew that someone else had also found their cave. "We must find that person and kill him," said their leader. He sent the bravest and smartest of the thieves into the city to find out if anybody knew of a man whose body had been cut into 6 parts and buried. When this messenger arrived in the city, only one shop, the cobbler's, was open. "Goodness me, old man," said the thief to Mustafa. "How do you manage to sew so neatly in such dim light?" "I may be old," replied Mustafa, "but Allah has blessed me with good eyesight. And just as well too, because a short while ago I had to sew up a body which had been cut into 6 parts. When I had finished, nobody would have guessed that the poor man had not died in one piece." The robber could hardly believe his luck. "I will give you 5 gold coins if you will show me where you performed such a marvel," he pleaded. "I cannot be sure of that direction, for I was led there blindfolded," Mustafa replied. "Perhaps if I were blinded once more, I might be able to lead you there by the sense of touch alone." And so, bandaged afresh, he was able to find the way to Ali Baba's house with little trouble, and was well pleased with his reward. The delighted robber placed a mark on the door with a piece of white chalk, and, sending Mustafa back to his shop, hurried away to the forest to tell his leader of his success. Shortly afterwards, when the servant Morgiana returned from the market, she saw the white mark on her master's door. Suspecting this to have been placed there by some unknown enemy, she fetched some chalk and marked all the other doors in the street in exactly the same way. When the robber returned to the city with his comrades, he was dismayed to find how easily he had been tricked. "I must be dreaming," he cried. "I marked only one door, and now I cannot tell which one it was." The robber chief was so angry that as soon as his men returned to the forest, he cut off the unfortunate messenger's head. He now sent another thief into the city to find Mustafa, who was able to find the door of Ali Baba's house once again. The robber marked his door with red chalk, but later, when the thieves came 2 by 2 into the city, they found that the clever Morgiana had made identical marks on the doors of all the houses in the street. Therefore, they returned to the forest and cut off the head of the second messenger. The robber chief now decided to do the job himself. With Mustafa's help, he soon found the house, but instead of marking it, he memorized its every detail so that he could find it again, even in the dark. Then he returned to the forest and told his comrades of his plan to murder all who lived in that house. A few nights later, disguised as an oil merchant, he arrived at Ali Baba's house with 19 donkeys, each of which carried 2 large jars. Only one of these jars had oil in it. All the rest concealed the thieves, one to each. The robber chief asked Ali Baba if he would be kind enough to allow him to rest his animals for the night in his courtyard, as he was a stranger in the city and had nowhere to sleep. Ali Baba did not recognize the robber chief, and being a generous man, he offered the oil merchant the hospitality of his house. The donkeys were unloaded and fed, and Morgiana was asked to prepare a meal for the guest. Later that night, the robber chief returned to the courtyard and whispered to each of his men in return, "Stay hidden until I throw some pebbles from my window into the yard. This will be the signal to climb out of your jar and kill everybody in the house." Still, later that night, Morgiana was working in the kitchen when the oil lamp began to go out. As there was no more oil in the house, she decided to borrow a cupful from one of the merchant's jars. Just as she was about to remove the lid of the first jar, she was surprised to hear a voice come from inside it, asking, "Is it time to come out yet?" Understanding the situation at once, the clever Morgiana whispered, "No, not yet." As she went from jar to jar, she heard the same question and gave the same answer, until she came to the one jar which contained the oil. Morgiana took enough oil from this jar to fill all the kettles in the house. She placed these on the kitchen fire and brought them to the boil. Then she carried the kettles into the courtyard and poured their contents into each of the pots in return. The oil was so hot that the robbers were killed instantly, before they could cry out. At midnight, when the robber chief threw his pebbles from the upstairs window, he could not understand why his men did not spring from their jars waving their swords. Thinking they must have fallen asleep, he crept into the courtyard to awaken them. When he discovered that his companions were all dead, he fled at once to the forest to work out a new plan of revenge. In the morning, Morgiana told her master what she had done. Ali Baba was so grateful to her that he made her his chief housekeeper. Then, with the help of another servant, he dug a great pit in his garden and buried the 37 bodies, and life returned to normal once again. One day, Ali Baba's son, who now looked after Qasim's old shop, said to his father, "I have recently become acquainted with a merchant who is new to the market. I have shared a midday meal with him 5 times without returning his hospitality. Perhaps we could hold a fine feast in his honor." Thus it was the robber chief, disguised in a long beard, came to be invited to eat in the house of the man he planned to kill. The moment she saw him, however, the wise Morgiana guessed who he really was and why he had come, especially when she noticed a dagger partly hidden in the folds of his robe. After all had eaten, Morgiana appeared before the company, dressed as a dancer, and offered to entertain them. Everyone was captivated by the beautiful girl and her curious dance, which involved the use of a small dagger. However, delight soon turned to horror when, advancing towards the robber guest, Morgiana suddenly plunged the dagger into his heart. Ali Baba cried out in disbelief, "Morgiana, what have you done? The man was an honored guest in my house. We shall be ruined forever." "Master, I have saved your life," replied Morgiana. "Your guest was none other than the robber chief who came here to kill you." So saying, she removed the false beard from the dead man's face and pointed to the dagger hidden in his robe. When Ali Baba saw that his guest was indeed the oil seller and captain of thieves, he realized that Morgiana had saved his life yet again. Overcome by joy, he cried, "Morgiana, my child, my daughter, will you be my daughter in very truth and marry this handsome young man, my son?" The wedding took place that very day, and there was much feasting and rejoicing in the house. In time, Ali Baba revealed the secret of the cave to his son, and his son to his son, and they shared their riches wisely and generously, so that Allah blessed them, everyone, and the whole city loved and honored them dearly for the rest of their days. The end. That's it for today, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed. For more read-alongs like these, don't forget to subscribe. If you enjoyed the book, give it a big thumbs up and share it with a friend. Don't forget to join us every day for a new video with a fun read-along. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!